Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified Doctor of Naturopathy, Dr. Stephen Cabral, shares with you exactly how you can reverse aging, take back your health, and live a life full of energy and passion, with new 20-minute episodes every single day to keep you healthy and engaged. Now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Great to have you here. This is episode 2741 of the Cabral Concept. Today we're going to be talking about how coffee affects the heart. Now, there'll be some good, some positives, a little bit of negatives, and we're going to teach you what to look for and if you're someone that might be susceptible to the negatives from coffee and caffeine-based consumption. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that you note that this is not just caffeine, because they actually looked at, in the second study, green tea drinkers, which has some caffeine in that, versus a black tea or coffee, and the results were actually markedly different. So let's get started. This one was fairly recent. It was a smaller study. The second one I'm going to bring you was somewhere around 20,000 people. I think it was just over 18,000. I'll bring you that study in particular because that's quite noteworthy. This one was just over 100 people, but the reason why this study was actually very well done is that they tracked the participants, the subjects, all day long. It was a pretty wild study. They looked at them and cross-referenced their locations on their phone, so they knew where they were at all times during the day. They knew when they entered a coffee shop. They also tracked it with their Fitbit or any plug-in towards like an Apple Health-based device. So they knew when they were getting their steps or they were consuming maybe some type of beverage, and they used continuous glucose monitors as well. So this was, again, a very fascinating study because now that we're starting to get much more into health tech, whether it be the CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors, the health tech monitoring devices, it might be a Hanu for your HRV, it might be an Oura Ring, it might be a Fitbit, it might be an Apple Watch, a Garmin, etc. You're able to just get a lot more data. And then, of course, if you're walking around and you have this phone in your pocket or pocketbook or something, then this is going to be able to track you if, of course, you're allowing yourself to be tracked. And even if you're not, you're probably being tracked anyway. But that's for another podcast. So when we look at this, the question was, does caffeine, specifically from coffee, lead to abnormal heartbeats? Because it has been theorized, or at least postulated, that caffeine causes heart-based issues. And we're going to look at a few different surroundings of that. But to cut right to the chase, coffee consumption, based on this study, there's a big caveat, so hold for the caveat, but coffee consumption does not increase abnormal heartbeats associated with an increased risk of the most common heart rhythm disturbance, according to this new study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And I will link it up for you today if you want to read this one. And it's at stephencabral.com/2741. You can definitely check that out as we're talking about this here today. I saw it in the Wall Street Journal. That's the first place that I actually saw this. And the common heartbeat irregularity that they were looking for was called an atrial fibrillation. So an atrial fibrillation, which could be increased if someone consumed caffeine. In this study, they were typically looking at 2 cups or more for caffeine drinkers, and then they were examining that versus non-caffeine drinkers. So what they found was this, and this was published another study in the Journal of the American Heart Association. This was last year. And I'm going to get to the hypertension in just a moment. But what they found was that although caffeine in this well-tracked group did not cause the atrial fibrillation, it did actually have one pro and one con. The caffeine enabled about 10 to 15% more steps per day. Now, again, was it a correlation? Was there any causation related to the caffeine? Maybe they had more energy, right? Reported energy. And so they got more steps. Now, the more steps you take, especially over 7,000 steps per day, it absolutely has a direct correlation with decreased mortality and decreased all-cause mortality. So that's pretty fantastic. That's dying from any disease goes down if you walk 7,000 or more steps per day, ideally right around 10,000. Now, so that was coffee drinkers got about 10 to 15% more steps per day. However, they averaged, on average, 35 less minutes of sleep per day. And that 35 minutes less sleep is actually a mortality risk factor, and it can increase an irregularity in the heart called a higher number of premature ventricular heartbeats. And there were 154 irregular ventricular heartbeats versus 102 for the non-caffeine group. So the caffeinated group had about 50% more of these premature ventricular heartbeats. Now, again, everybody has them, typically minor, but it could contribute to weakening of the heart as someone gets older. So it's unclear as this is offset, by better activity, more walking during the day. Does it end up being a wash if you get more steps? Does the 35 minutes less sleep matter? Now, we don't know. But what I want to share with you is this. I think, and I should say, I know you're going to be someone that's going to be able to see if it's affecting you, right? And I think that there's also a correlation as to when you may be having your caffeine during the day. So I would love to see a follow-up study on this. I think that there will absolutely be one done. But if you're looking at your Oura Ring, or you're looking at your Whoop device, or your Apple isn't quite there yet, Garmin, the watches aren't quite there yet. The BioStrap is there in terms of tracking your sleep. It doesn't separate out deep and REM as the last time that I used it, but there's a lot of devices that can. And so what I recommend is, again, you're getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, more towards 8 to 9 if you're someone recovering from any type of dis-ease of the body. And the other thing that you're looking for is 90 minutes of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM. So out of all of your sleep each night, you need 90 minutes from REM, 2 hours from deep. REM's going to come typically later in the night, or early in the morning, however you want to look at it. And your deep's going to come a little bit earlier. That's typically what we see in our practice. We track thousands and thousands of people inside of our practice, and they, that's what they report. Not only do they feel better when they get an amount of the sleep, that's actually what's recommended as well. So 90 minutes deep sleep, 2+ hours REM, you'll be able to see if caffeine is affecting you. What the study didn't look at necessarily was time of the day of coffee consumption. So if you're drinking 1 or 2 cups in the morning, and it's not leading to anxiety, jitters, nervousness, higher blood pressure, which I want to get to in just 2 minutes from now. What I want you to think about is, okay, you might be good, but if you have an afternoon cup of coffee, how does that affect your sleep? You probably may only know if you're using a biotech-based device, like something that tracks your sleep. And again, I know that there's a lot of sleep mattresses and liners and all those things, so you can use whatever you'd like, but you really have to look at one thing consistently over time. So my recommendation is that it may not be the caffeine per se, it may be the time of the day. And I would just say, just for most people, I don't think that you're going to get a ton of benefit over 200 milligrams of caffeine per day. I would actually say that there's going to start to be detriment to that. And that's about 1.5, 2 cups of coffee maximum. Now, I know a lot of people drink a lot more coffee than that. And I know that you can cite studies on Alzheimer's and type 2 diabetes and others showing the improvement. But, I just wonder, is that because of the antioxidants in coffee? Like, do you need the caffeine? And I'm not sure that you do. I don't know that, those people following a more of a Mediterranean diet, high antioxidants and all these great things, that they need to be drinking that much coffee. And I would say that the answer to that is no. And that's because when I look at this next study, which I'm bringing you right now, on high blood pressure and the heart, I'm going to give you just the highlights. This is what the highlights found. This is a 19-year follow-up. This is quite the study. And this was done, again, with about 18,000, well, I can give you the exact number, 18,570 adults between the ages of 40 and 79. 6,570 were men, 12,000 were women. This was done in Japan, and it looked at 19 years of follow-up, 842 cardiovascular-related deaths out of those 18,000 plus participants. Here's what they found. Drinking 2 or more cups of coffee a day was associated with twice the risk of cardiovascular death in people whose blood pressure was 160/100, compared with those who did not drink any coffee. Now remember, this is in a hypertension, high blood pressure group. If you don't have high blood pressure, okay, that's not you. But drinking caffeinated coffee with high blood pressure, really bad idea. Okay, next, drinking 1 cup a day of coffee was not associated with increased risk of death from cardiovascular disease across any blood pressure categories. Okay, so 1 cup of coffee a day, and a cup of coffee, by the way, is 8 ounces. So if you're looking at a 12 ounce when you're out, or 16 ounce would be 2 cups of coffee. So just kind of letting you know where things fall, because a lot of times just because we can fill a mug, we think it's 1 cup of coffee. It's not 1 cup of coffee, right? It's not how much can you fill in a very large container. So, and the last part, which was, I would say, the most interesting, was green tea consumption of all kinds was not associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease mortality across any blood pressure categories. So it's really important because green tea contains about 40 to maybe 50 milligrams of caffeine. Maybe that's 1/3 of like a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And if you're looking at a small, that's a small. And if you're looking at a Starbucks coffee, which is 270 milligrams, that's a lot of caffeine, right? In just a tall size, which is they're small, that would only be like 20%, 25%. So, when you look at it, it's the caffeine that seems to be making the difference. And that's because caffeine can accelerate and speed up heart rate, increase anxiety, tension in the body, nervous system tension as well, and raise blood pressure. So this was, again, a really great study. This was done in the Journal of the American Heart Association. And one thing I would say is if you need a little bit of caffeine and you're worried about the coffee, think about switching to green tea or matcha green tea. Very high in the EGCG, and which is a high antioxidant polyphenol. That's why I wanted to bring this to you, because there's also a very significant decrease in potential cancer risk and maybe all-cause mortality by consuming 2 to 3 cups of green tea per day. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to drink green tea in order to be a healthy human, but I do want to let you know that there is significant health benefits to that green tea, maybe with very little downside, as we're seeing in many of these studies. So hopefully this was helpful. What I would say is if you're borderline blood pressure, meaning like 130, we'll say over 80, be careful with your caffeine consumption. Again, I can't give you medical advice, medical treatment plans, medical cures, or diagnosis on this podcast. What I would share with you is probably keep it a 1 cup per day if you're a coffee person, if you love your coffee. But also think about this. I have a whole podcast on how to switch over to decaf or do less caffeine. I'll link that up today as well. That's at stephencabral.com/2741. We give that to all of our new clients because it's not that there aren't a lot of benefits to coffee. There are. The benefits come in a lot of those polyphenols, the antioxidants. You want to get organic coffee. You want it to be tested for mold and contaminants. And again, you want it to be a high polyphenol based type, which is not a cheap coffee. You need to get a good, strong, not dark roast, but a good, strong quality coffee. And so I'll link that up today. All my coffee recommendations, the companies that I use, are always at stephencabral.com/resources. I'll try to link one up today as well. And I'll link up the studies. So I'll let you come to your own conclusions. My recommendation is that if you're relying on caffeine for your energy, something very well could be wrong with your HPA axis, which helps control your adrenals, the HPT axis, which controls the thyroid. So we need to look at your overall metabolism with a stress mood and metabolism test. Enjoy your 1 cup or so of coffee per day. Don't overdo it. Try to move in some green tea if you still want that caffeine from maybe even a healthier source. And then decaffeinated coffee, as long as it's Swiss water processed, organic, tested for contaminants, can give you a lot of those polyphenol and antioxidant-based benefits. So again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. All of the notes, all of the study links will be at stephencabral.com/2741. Take care, everybody. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my health results accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stephencabral.com/courses.